Uju anin Heid Erdrich Indigenous Jaganashimong Makwandotum. I'm Heid, and I'm Makwa clan. I'm really excited to be here tonight with Louise, and we kind of have a plan, but things may shift, so bear with us.
Bonjour, my name is Louise. I'm from Lac Courte Orielles, up here in northern Wisconsin. I'm very humbled and honored to be here tonight with Heid and all of you. I think some of my sisters are in the audience tonight too, which is always really nice. So welcome. Thanks to Galena Library for allowing us to be here too. I'm excited.
Thank you so much. It's really great to get a chance to read with Louise, and I was really grateful that Galena let me pick my partner for tonight, and because I admire her work so much.
That's so crazy. That's so
should we start by each reading a poem, and then we can have our conversation?
Yeah,
sure. Sorry.
Do you want to start, or should I?
How about I start, just because it to follow you is intimidating.
All right, same at you. Okay.
So I'm gonna actually start with something from the collection tonight, and then I think I will read a new piece as well. But just want to say that when This Is Where came out and I did my book launch last year, Heid was actually gracious enough to be at that event, and I'm just so thankful how it was received, how it has connected so many communities and so many young writers, older writers, just this community. And so I'm so grateful. So I'm going to start with the title poem from the book, This Is Where. So I hope you enjoy. And if you've heard it before, sorry that you have to hear it again. This is where. I'm from Beneshi's bloodline. That's Bill Baker, if you don't speak Ojibwe Moan. Ni Magizi Dodem. I'm from 6 Mile, 49ing up the driveway, sitting on green boxes, watching cars. Sometimes their doors didn't match. I'm from Packer games on Sundays, Greyhound trips for Christmas, and Easter baskets with Carla. I'm from women with the same last name and a father none of us knew. I'm from the woods, northern, where pines and birch bark blanket both bends of tribal roads, paved and gravel. I'm from a single parent household, Michael Jackson cassette tapes, Purple Rain posters, and latchkey kids. Title V programs, commodes on pantry shelves, cucumbers from Grandpa Jake's garden, and a mean old dog named Turkey. I'm from crying won't change anything, and you should have known better. I'm from punitive silence, and where it's normal. Hugs are warm, and forced Catholicism still weighs heavy on me mama's shoulders. Miigwech.
Miigwech. I'm going to read a short poem that's about language, and then I'm going to ask some questions to Louise about language. And this one's really short, and it's not about Indigenous language. It's about what language you would speak if you hadn't seen someone for a long time, so long that you didn't know if you'd even speak the same language, but you loved each other. So, red language. Just a second, I have to take this message off my screen. Okay, red language. If you heard the words you once said, in our wild place rough with scrub roses, in sand. If your words came back, gray and kind as mild winter, believe me, I'd still understand. Offer my own red language, my tongue to your tongue. So we recall what we once said that made us live, made us choose to live. So that's a little poem about language. This is from my new book, Little Big Bully, sort of new, came out in 2020, at the end of 2020, when nobody was really doing anything, especially not reading books of poems. So it feels really new to me. I'd asked the question before we decided to talk tonight about Anishinaabe the Ojibwe language that I am just a student of and a bad student at that, but that was spoken in my family by my grandfather and his parents and siblings and my uncles, not my mother, but others in my community. And it's been so important to me to follow and get a sense of what people do with Anishinaabe language in their work. So I thought I'd ask Louise, can you tell me about, how do you work with Anishinaabe in your poems, and how did that process work for you? And maybe read an example for us.
Great question. First of all, I don't think any of us are bad students at that. I think my generation and even my mom's generation too, I think we give ourselves a really hard time about our language in a sense of shame by not being able to speak it fluently. And yet at the same time, I'm in a intro to Ojibwe culture class because I can't take one more social policy class at the moment. And we're having these conversations, and what I want us to remember and what I want myself to remember and what I want to share with you tonight is that we have historical trauma embedded in our DNA, that our language, that our identity was forcefully stripped from us, and we're survivors of that. And you see that in our young people, and you see that in our elders. So don't ever feel bad about not being able to understand or speak. I don't do that. We're relearning and we're regrouping, and our communities are so strong and encouraging in that way. So I just hope that that can resonate with you. For myself, I've always said that I speak Ojiblish, like a mixture of Ojibwe and English. It wasn't really spoken fluently in my home, but it was there, and as far as incorporating it into my writing is me. It's a reflection of my experiences and how I feel. So it wasn't foreign to put that in there. In the one poem, I think it's within, I asked the question, where is my Bamadiziwen? Where is my good life? When you focus on tragedy or focus on loss, you're searching for that good way. And I think as Anishinaabe, as Indigenous people, we have that within ourselves. So it's always there. And I think it just comes out. If I try to craft my poem in a certain way, it doesn't come out as pure. So I just let it be what it is. And to be honest, sometimes just an Ojibwe word just sounds better. I hope I answered your question.
You did. Do you want to read the poem you mentioned?
Yes, I do. So this was written at a time where I was really trying to remember the truth of who I was and not what my circumstances were speaking to me. And I'm really glad that it was put in this collection. This is called Within. I am a woman gray within shadows, losing my sense of normalcy through the monotony that freezes my already cold spine. My hands never warm. Am I not created for more? The crude cement cell block erases the moon. My dreams sense no guidance, my tears no destination, my scars still wound. When will my ancestral guide return? I carve my sternum, carve the holiness out, ceasing my breath, the genesis of my fear. I am not home. Where is my Bamadiziwin? I am a foreigner in my own land, a ghostless shadow begging to be remembered for more than solitude. Where are my well-worn moccasins to guide me home? Who will carry this desolation when these Migizi wings are too dirty from thundering storms? Savior, I am within my kaleidoscope breaking and failing my heartbeat again. Ni mama, I miss your home. Ningozi, I still smell your morning breath. Abba,
Miigwech, Anishin, it's beautiful. Yeah, you know, I have to say my teachers never made me feel like a bad student, so I probably shouldn't have said that. I literally meant I don't show up sometimes when I'm supposed to be studying. But one of the things my teachers did tell me really early on was when I asked, you know, how can I get help? It's hard for me to learn this language. What can I do? How can I get help? And they said two things. One, if I'm going to teach you, I want you to use the language. What do you do? And I said, well, I'm a writer and I write in English. And they said, well, you should bring some Anishinaabe language in. So, and I said, well, it'll be, you know, a long time before I have that ability. And they said, it doesn't matter. Just promise me you'll use it. So that's the main reason I started using Anishinaabe Moan in my writing in English, even though it is kind of, you know, Ojibwe or Anishinaablish or whatever it is. It's a mark of who we are now, the many of us who are all hoping together to, you know, bring this language to the life that it leads and, you know, strengthen the communities through it. So the other thing my teacher said was that I should get a name, an Anishinaabe Moan name. I had a baby name, but I didn't have an adult name. So I went through the ceremony to get a name. And then when my kids were a little older, they got their adult names too, beyond their baby names. And this is a poem about what it's like to be able to get a name at a different point in your life, because taking a name, having a name gifted to you from somewhere beyond yourself is just a really powerful thing for a lot of people at different points in their life. And I'm really grateful that we have that as part of culture. This poem is called How It Escaped Our Attention. When a whole being births into your hands, still you see your hands, no matter the unworldly beauty of the child. Then the universe of words works past cosmology to a useful name, a handle in English, unlike the Indigenous genderless language of verbs. Moon blues, comet misses, moon looms super, moon bleeds. Many cosmological shifts later, our hands eclipsed by the lovely being come so far, come closer than ever across the several heavens we Ojibwe name, the layers of our atmosphere, and further out there, the fourth sky, forever sky. When you first came to us, we did not have an Ojibwe name to know the sky beyond the sky beyond the sky. How were we to know he was, she was, they are, you? How were we to know who? That's a poem for people who shift in their lives and bring on other names, which is a very powerful thing. Let's see, question, do you have a question for me? And we can start taking questions from the audience too, I think.
Yeah, maybe not necessarily a question, but in regard to Ojibwe names or spirit names, however resonates with you. I was given one like in my early 30s, I think, and I don't share that publicly. The man who gave it to me passed away a few years ago, and I didn't speak it out loud for a year after that, and I'm still really guarded with it. I think because of my connection with my elder, but then also protecting who I am while I'm still trying to figure out who I am in this big world, and keeping a piece to myself. I was in an environment for a long time where I had to be so transparent with everything, every part of who I was. And now I'm in a chapter in my life where I get to choose my own boundaries. And that's one of the boundaries that I choose. And I think it's so important for Anishinaabe to have that name, because we come from our creator, and it allows us that personal connection, that personal kind of air just between me and my creator. And it's so beautiful, and I admire adults that that go out and seek that. And it's I'm losing my words here, but
yeah, I mean,
it's really important.
Yeah, and it can be very strong, and there are different, I know it's kind of an amazing thing to people sometimes to think, but in English culture, people change their names when they get married. They have names, of nicknames, that sort of thing. It's just more thoughtful, I think, more thought about in depth, and not alone. You don't do it alone. Somebody has to dream that name for you. So it's important. And some people will say their names and some people won't. Some people have more than one name, and one they don't say and one they do. And I just think that it's remarkable, and I love that my teachers thought it would help. And I think it did help. It did help me to move through those things. So let's see, how about, I know you were going to read a new poem. Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, I can. So I shared with Heid before the recording that Lac Courte Orielles community has lost so many of our people within the last year, and it seems like we aren't able to catch up, right? That our mourning is extended, if that makes any sense. And one thing that I learned in my own healing practice is to write, even if it doesn't make sense, right? I was able to do that. I was able to find the time somehow and process certain things that way. But with writing too, there's always this editorial process that can be a little edgy. It was frightening for me in the beginning, but it really helps to bring out what's already inside and kind of shave away the unnecessary. And I was fortunate to have some editing help on this most recent piece, and this is called Remembering. Surrounded by crisp and sharp air of baboon, me mama's house keeps me warm. She keeps me standing, walking, still after those funerals have passed. Holding my mother's hands, tears are building inside my sternum. I'm still choking over his death. I'm remembering to exhale, remembering it's okay to sit with these mourning tears. Surfacing screams from my incarcerated pain Will someone ask me how I'm doing? Sometimes the darkness brings back those cell blocks, invading my well-being. Miniwa. I trace my fingertips, trace on concrete blocks, numbering the days I have been home. I'm still counting days. Prison trauma has scarred my pale frame, changing the way I carry myself, changing the way I listen to my family. I'm still remembering my days. Me. Little jagged there a little bit, but I think there is freedom in not only expression, but freedom in writing, freedom in the rawness of truth. And I'm very fortunate that I have a writing practice to allow me to evolve in the journey as an Anishinaabe woman, but also as a spiritual being on this walk. It can be quite tumultuous, but beautiful.
Yeah, and there's so much there. I mean, so much that you teach just in that poem. And you know, one of the questions I'd ask was, can poetry help an Anishinaabe community? Can it help our communities, whether they're urban or rural or reservation? How does it work? But that's just such a great lesson to just not, you know, be unafraid to notice the things that are really painful and hard to overcome, and, you know, draw the grief of the types of grief together, the grief of incarceration and recovery. You know, it just really, you know, to let people know that we can do that with our words and our thinking, that we can make pathways between events, I think is really important, because, you know, the world feels kind of out of control if we don't learn to see, you know, those patterns in our lives. So it's just really beautiful and helpful to me, I mean, right this minute. So thank you.
Thank you. And we're more similar than we are different. And I think our society prides itself on individualism, and uniqueness and differences, and which isn't necessarily a bad thing at times. And yet I challenge that by saying there's so often a time when we're looking to connect, looking to feel each other in a similar and heartbreaking way. And if we just move ourselves out of the way, we can see that that we're all related. And the Dakota language is so beautiful, and they have a phrase, and hopefully I don't pronounce it too wrong, but it's Matakuiase, which translates to "we are all related." And I think Ojibwe it's Nakanagana, but yeah, that remembrance of we're more similar than different. So.
In Denaway and Maganido too, just, you know, my relations, speaking out to relations. I have to show you something though. Can any of you read this mug? It might look backward. That's from the art program that I worked at for a long time. So yeah, it's a really important thing, and a concept that would be radical, would change the world. You couldn't treat people the way that we treat people. You couldn't, you know, non-therapeutically, without forgiveness and compassion, treat people the way that institutions and systems do. If you thought these people were all your relative and you respected and loved and treated your relatives the way relatives should be treated. Yeah. I think I'm going to read a little poem because I had my book open to this page, and there's two poems here about reaching across what feel like boundaries, and they're both short, so I think I'll read them both, and how what it means to be singular or plural. And this one is called We Singular. Make us liken, make my body, our body, a colony eating air and light, each other making God with our exchange of DNA and coded info, we would be entire, enveloping, beyond boundaries. We'd make art outlining branches, even pine cones, just because we could. We body would be, but no, just my body, soul, solitary, alone, trying to sense impossible task, millions of teeming others, lives of cells, virus, germ, creatures swimming in my tears, healers, harmers, everyone artless and automatic, should feel like love, union, reunion, should feel like creation, should. So that's that striving to feel creation in all of us that I think is one of our jobs on Earth. And then another one, this relates to Anishinaabe, even though I don't use the word, I'm always thinking about what is alive in Anishinaabe, because that's one of the things you need to know to study the language. So this poem is called Stone Animate. Whether creation carved them or not, my hands are some concretion, some ton of rock, washed over and over in surf until sand encases the glow of quartz. Hardness thrust up through Earth's crust to tumble 100 million years, and here we reach each other. I reach out with hands that match this skipping stone, and I think a moment, we know each other. And though for the purposes of art I should, I will not let you go.
If I can just say one thing that I've always been attracted to in your writing is your connection to Earth, and not only Earth as an entity, but all of the elements of Earth. And when I was kind of just reading, right, just enjoying poetry, that thought always came back when I read any of your stuff, how remarkably connected you are to various elements of Earth, and how that expression comes through very clearly in your writing, and such a homage to Anishinaabe as well, because we're creatures of the earth, right? The earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to her, and just a beautiful expression of all those elements. So
yeah, and I think, thank you so much. That's very meaningful to me. I don't really engage the whole genre of echo poet, or it's not that I don't feel like I fit, I just don't do it consciously. So I feel like, no, I'm not the one who is trying to do that. It just happens that I'm a dreamy sort of person, and I'll be staring at some lichen so long that a poem will come. Or I'll pick up a rock and I'll be thinking about, hey, we know each other and you're coming with me for a while. Eventually the rock will want to go home and I'll let it go home. But right now you're coming with me. And eventually a poem comes from that. And that's just where a lot of things come from. And I know that that's something that's intrinsic to us, because that is our first teacher. The world around us, watching carefully until it tells us its stories, listening really hard for those stories that help us understand how to live here, and those things are shifting and changing. I don't believe those stories will stop. I don't believe there's only a finite number of them. I feel that they'll keep coming to us if we listen hard. People who learn Anishinaabe will hear things differently, and that's really exciting to me. That I have a nephew who is becoming a first speaker. He's been raised in the language. He's been raised bilingually, but a great nephew. And so I just think that will happen. People will hear these things coming. And, maybe that's what I can do with teaching my poetry, is my way of getting poetry is helping people to just indulge your innate desire to just look at stuff and think about it. Look at a problem, even a problem with other people, an emotion that troubles or excites you, or gives you great pleasure. Just do that depth of listening. So that's what I hope will happen. So would you like to read another one? Has anybody got questions yet in the chat? I don't see anything yet. There's 33 people out there listening to us, and I feel like it's just us talking and reading to each other. Why don't we do this? We should just Zoom each other and read our poems to each other.
As great as that is, I'm open for a couple questions. I'm sure someone has one. There's always a question, and we don't have to just listen to, just us. Does anyone want to? I can't really see everybody else in here.
Yeah, let me open the chat. There's nothing in the chat yet, so I encourage you. Pat, darling, I know you're out there. I hope you're feeling better. I see your name up there.
I see her too. One thing that you had mentioned earlier, and kind of maybe just a rhetorical question, was how does poetry help, or how can poetry help our Indian communities? And I think of my nieces. I think of the little ones that are around me, and how brave they are in this chaotic world, that they're not afraid to be or express how they intrinsically are. And poetry is that precise thing. And if we can kind of lose this grandeur idea of what poetry is, and even in my own journey, I was really uncomfortable with other poets recognizing me as a poet, because I had put so many, including you, on this kind of higher level. And I know I talk about your poem, The Girl in Geography class, all the time, but that writing really shifted how I was able to be secure in my own evolution as an Indian woman, not just as a writer, but as an Indian woman. And not that one chapter is going to be evolution, right? We continue to do that in all decades of our life. And so poetry is such a important aspect of who we are as a people, and as spiritual beings too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Sometimes I write a poem just to get myself out of a box, and I kind of vaguely remember writing that poem to get past a memory of, something that was weirdly traumatic about being in geography and feeling trapped by the geography of not the literal natural living world around me, but the idea of borders and states and products. And I just felt so trapped. So I had to start thinking about my escape from where I was. And as a very young girl, I left home when I was 14 in a safe way. Luckily, I was able to do that. But yeah, it's just something. It was about that, about how do you form your own escape, your own boundaries and countries. So I'm glad that touched you, because I was really just thinking about my youth. But that's the beauty of poetry. It moves across these things. So I see there's a question. When did you start writing? Were you young or adult at the time? I'm enjoying the conversation and reading too. Yeah, I would love to know about when you started writing. I remember we talked about this, or that was introduced to me at one point, but I'd love to hear the story again.
I started writing, I think when I was in puberty, just trying to kind of understand the biological changes and how I fit into my own family, and how I fit into junior high, which can be extremely intimidating. Thank God there was no social media back then. But I just started writing, and I recently found one of those journals from, I think, 8th grade, and it was really pretty cursive. It was in pastel colored ink, and at that time it was my true expression, right? But it was a private conversation that I knew that I could have, and the only private, honest conversation that I knew I could have. Yet I was never told that, right? There was this silence around me, punitive and normal, right? That I don't know, kind of incensed this idea that I could only have certain conversations with myself. And luckily I was able to find a pen, and through different experiences and different circumstances, I was able to continue writing, not only as a survival mechanism, but as a growth process, and then was introduced to a community of writers that loved writing and introduced this idea of craft and line breaks and true voice, and really welcomed me and allowed me to kind of nurture that, and we're here. So yeah.
And I think I was, you know, probably grade school, we were lucky enough to have a poet in the schools come to our school. And I'd heard poetry a lot. My dad recited poetry. He was a teacher and he liked to recite things to his students. The trick that he never actually told me, this is a trick, but if you sing or recite something to your students, it calms them down instantly. So teachers, keep that in your back pocket. So he did, you know, he did that, and he did it with us kids too. So it helped us a lot to value poetry from an early age. But then I had this teacher in my classroom, this visiting poet, and you know, I just did the exercises like everybody else, but he really treated me kindly, like, this is, you should be a poet. And I was like, well, okay. I'd always wanted to be a visual artist. So it was some point I feel like I had to make a choice, and I went more toward poetry. And then, you know, 40 years later, I work with visual artists, and I do a lot of that for my, you know, I don't think there should be as big a differentiation between genres because they do the same thing. So why shouldn't poetry be visual art, and why shouldn't visual art be poetry? So, thanks for that question, Karen Stockwell. And then Sandra has a nice comment there about hearing our voices. Hi, Sandra, Sandy, nice of you to come.
Yeah. When I was kind of entering my college years, I started with this idea that I was going to go into psychology. And I took intro to psych, and it was like, yes, this is my jam. This is what I'm going to do. And then the next semester I had to take like abnormal psychology, and was horrified, and quickly decided that that's not what I wanted to do at all. And I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that I had that class so early on. And I'm still now in my early 40s, still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But yeah, this writing thing is kind of cool. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me happy. So most of the time, I mean, sometimes it's hard too. Sometimes you're like, oh God, I got to get through this. And this book, Little Big Bully, parts of it were really hard, just remembering all the abuse that I was aware of as a young person, and all the times that I just barely made it out of some situation. You know, that was really difficult. I don't usually write that personally, so sometimes it is a little difficult, but then I would give myself, you know, an out and do a poem that just sort of helped me, you know, for those moments that I wasn't trapped, those moments, give myself a little credit for the moments that I got out of some bad situation or stood up to a bully. You know, that's a lot of it is about, what do we do? Do we become a bully? Often we do. Sometimes in your life, you're bullied and you're the bully. It's part of our nature, and it's part of our responsibility to not be, you know, caught up in that cultural abuse.
Yeah. I remember when I was putting together the collection for the chapbook, an editor, mentor, a friend of mine said, this is good. You have this, you're talking about this part, and you're talking about this part, and you talk about over here, but you're not talking about where you presently are. And immediately I became defensive, and I didn't understand it at that time. And I had told her, I don't want to talk about where I am right now. I had just lost my elder. It just wasn't a healthy time for me. And she really encouraged me to write through that. And so I tried. I intentionally really said, okay, this I'm going to write about today. I'm going to write about right now. And I couldn't do it. The only thing that I could do was release fragments of a thought. And so I said, okay, that's what I have. So that's what I accepted. And for a month, I think I just had fragments come here, come there. And at the end of the month, we took those fragments and we formed a poem, which came out really, really beautifully, which was a new kind of startling process for me. But I really learned a lot at that time, just to be able to be where you are, even if that's not where you want to be, and not to react, right? You know, because we always do have that question, how am I going to respond? Am I going to respond in an empathetic way, or am I going to react because of whatever is inside of me? And oftentimes I've chosen the latter, which isn't helpful or nice. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. It's wonderful that somebody helped you center, though, as painful as it is. You know, sometimes editors say things, just even a little thing. It almost doesn't matter what they say, because we're going to pick one thing and we're going to, you know, be like a oyster making a pearl. So, but it is so important to get that, you know, gritty little something, I think. And it gets harder as you get more along in your poetry years. People are not as likely, they're used to hearing you, so they don't give you the same kind of interrogation of your poetry. That's pleasant, but it's also like, I need that. So luckily I have a few people who really, I'll go to them and I'll be like, give it your best going over. So
yeah. I did say that to an editor. I was so proud of this one piece. I was like, you know, a third grader with my 100 point test or whatever. And I brought it to my editor and I'm like, here you go. You're gonna just love it. And it's gonna be perfect and great. And when I got it back, she had said, it's a good start. And I was just shattered, you know.
Oh, no. I'm sure I've done that to people.
She was so right. You know, she could, she's seen what was inside of all of that kind of extra fluff, is for lack of better words. And it's important to have solid editors around you. My collection definitely isn't a solo project. There's so many hands and minds that really helped me create that. So I'm very, very thankful to my editors. If any of them are in the audience tonight, I owe you big. So thank you.
I know at least one person who gives me feedback is out there. So thank you, Kate, who's listening tonight. Shall we read a couple more poems? I really would love questions, so feel free to give us questions on the chat. And I wish that I knew what you all were writing. So if you're a writer, just go ahead and say it in the chat, what you're working on writing or reading. If you're a reader, I'm excited about what people are reading too. Although I haven't read much yet this year. Usually January is a deep read month for me, but it's been really a rough time. And yeah, so I haven't been reading as much as I normally do. But yeah, do you want to read another one, or do you want me to start?
Yeah,
okay.
I can read one, and then I think I might have to exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before I do read, I just want to say Chi-miigwech to everyone, to the Galena Library again, and to you, Heid, for extending the invitation. It blew my mind when you first told me about it. So I'm just so thankful that we can gather, that we can share truth and remind each other of the threads of community that is so necessary in this time. And thank you for prayers and allowing me to be present in this space and time that I'm needed to be in. So after this, thank you everybody for showing up, but I will be leaving after this poem. So Blessings to you all. I'm going to read Inside. There is no movement. Each maple and golden locust limb weighs heavy with Christian snow, concealing the bark and its impurities. Redemption expels layers of man-made sin, legends of grace, holy grace, sustaining anemic Anishinaabe bodies inside stone penitentiaries. As each night beckons, so too my dreams, seduction in unwanted lands, throughout still rivers of frozen purity. This is my baboon.
Thank you.
Igwit. Blessings to you all.
Just before you go, will you hold your chapbook up so people can see it and take a shot if they want to? This is weird. Beautiful.
Shout out to Diane Whitehawk, who did the beautiful cover art. Just an amazing Anishinaabe artist. So I'm so thankful for all the love and support, and just being accepted into this community of writers. And so if you can just everybody take a look at your screen, I'm right next to Heid. So, you know, like I turn into a groupie fan with her, and I'm just so thankful. And if you're a writer out there, please keep writing. We need female voices. We need truth. We need compassion, and we need each other. So I'm so thankful.
Miigwech, Gigawabaman, Weweni Sigo. Thanks. Now it's just me. Oh, what a nice thanks that everybody got. I hope that that these will be shared with Louise, these nice notes. I can read for a little bit and take questions still. And I'm going to read one poem that I thought of when we were talking about the point in life where we started writing, and Louise mentioned junior high. So I'm going to read this. Perpetual Communion of Junior High. She used a brittle gloss of sugar as emblem of her girlhood game, the kind of translucent candies, watermelon, green apple, cinnamon hot. Eyes closed, you heard the crinkle and unwrap as you stood, tongue out. If you were in, it went in. If you were out, you spit out the twist of cellophane or swallowed at the jock priestess of junior high's command. Or maybe you carried your own candies, showed her your tongue stained pink or green or red, stuck it out hard and passed. True, her goons kicked you in the ass, but to this day, any artificial taste takes you back. There was a time you stood apart from all of that. A little poem about bullies and where they start and what to do, and you know, the moment when you maybe did stand up, and how could you do that now? How can you recognize the same behaviors? Okay, so some questions. I write flash memoir, children's stories, short stories, Kathleen says, and poetry. Wow, that's great. Flash memoir. That sounds, I think I might have accidentally done some of those because I can't write long nonfiction essays. They're always tiny and short. So I never thought of that. Flash memoir, I love that. Have you tried other forms of writing such as prose? Is there something you'd like to write in the future? Yes, I do write prose. I write nonfiction. I've written fiction. I even have a degree in fiction, but it's not my favorite thing to do. Because those people could get irritating and then you got to live with them for a long time. I don't know how Louise, my sister, does it. She has all these people that are real to her. And I am working on nonfiction work. Have you set your poetry to music? A few people have in the past made music, a choral, and I don't have everybody's name in my head, but I've had a few people, and I can't sing very well. I like to sing, and I did make a few songs, and once upon a time, a few years ago, I learned to sing them. but I do also am included in a ladies hand drum group, and we, mostly Anishinaabe women, we have made songs that have come to me. I don't know if they're my writing, but they are songs. So that's a wonderful experience. Yeah, I wish I could sing like some people can. Let's see, any other questions or that I could get from you all? Louise had a family emergency she had to tend to, so I told her I would excuse her when she goes, but I miss her already. Who are my favorite poets? That's a really good question. Of course, I love Joy Harjo, our poet laureate and a Creek poet and musician, memoirist. She is just a liberating writer to read for me, being able to, bring a broad history of the United States into a really personal voice, being very feminist, having strong imagery. Those are all things that I really loved about her work, and connecting to, history too. That is something that I like to do. So Joy Harjo is a huge favorite of mine, but there's some poets that I really like that are not terribly well known. And and I feel like Louise is one of those, Louise Waakaa'igan, so that's why I wanted her to read with me tonight. And then, I have to say that Native American poets aren't all that well known, and that's one of the reasons I published some of the poets that they were just on the cusp of being fairly well known. And I don't think my publication did it, they sort of simultaneously, but that's one of the reasons I published New Poets of Native Nations. So you can see some of my favorite poets there. Another poet I really love is Kimberly Blazer, who was the Wisconsin Poet Laureate. She's also Anishinaabe. Sun Young Shin is a big favorite of mine, a poet out of Minneapolis, Coffeehouse Press. She has a new book coming out called Wet Hex, which is fabulously beautiful. So yeah, I like poets who are a little bit cerebral, but also have a strong physical image or setting in their poems. So, let's see, does poetry have a place in Native culture? I saw Joy Harjo years ago, fantastic. Every culture is different, right? And there are hundreds and hundreds of Native cultures, but in the folks I talked to and who taught me about songs in Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe-Moan, they're very close to poetry. There's songs that are traditional, songs that are given to people, songs that are part of ceremonies and came from, original source, but there are also personal kind of poem songs that people kept, and they didn't necessarily sing it the way we sing today. Some people just presented it with the strength of their voice, not really a melody, and that I think is very close to poetry. So I feel like that was a long history of that. And I did, although my grandfather was quite old when I was a girl, I did hear him give his songs in a way that strikes me as very much like poetry. And he gave them in Ojibwe. Let's see. Kate put in the link for Sun Young Shin at Coffeehouse Press and Kim Blazer. So I think we're pretty close to the end here. I'm just going to read one poem to put you out the door. And it's one of the last poems in the book. So if you've heard me read before, you are going to have to go through this again. But it's a poem about what would happen if things did not get worse. And if there was some sort of, liberation. It's based on the premise that I read about, that there are colors that we humans can't see, but there's no reason that a new color might appear and then we can see it. And I thought, what would that do to the world? Maybe that would be the change. So this is called Reprieve. We did not expect the light to break into prism and the earth to cool. A new deluge, knowledge. We waited, praised, so much we did not know, we did not know. We missed the purple of snow shadow, but kept snow, snow. Our skins struggled into iridescence. Everyone grew new. We knew not who walked among us. Locks dropped off. Some felt a loss. Clocks stopped. They shut up days, walked out nights. Some gave up when Jesus did not come. Fine, we thought. We're done with dying. Now this shimmer, everlasting lake of time, where every child born is ours, every child mine. So thank you so much. I really appreciate having been here with you all tonight.